Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Got a good topic for you today, so let's get right to it. What's the worst accident that you've had in your workplace? Little not safe for work, which is the whole point of this video. But if you like it, please remember to subscribe, like, and share. Thanks.
Not my story, but my dad told me it. A man got his arm stuck in a machine, which degloved his arm. After he recovered, he was showing the safety people how it happened, and he accidentally degloved his other arm. Death by asphyxiation when he walked into a pure nitrogen environment without the PPE that was hanging on the door and had to be moved to open. Along with disabling all the safety measures, there were many, and didn't notify the required spotter. To this day, I still wonder if it was planned suicide. Working at McDonald's, a girl slipped walking past the deep fryer and her hand went into the deep fryer. The manager wrapped her hand in a cloth. When she pulled it off to put in water, all of her skin came off. We were still made to work, so we walked off. They were even happy to keep using the fryer after it. Working for a specialized trucking company, a fellow driver lost control fully loaded going down a winding mountain road. The truck tipped over, slid across 2 lanes of oncoming traffic, and landed in a field. Truck and trailer were absolutely demolished. Cab was flattened, and the driver, a huge MFer, crawled out the back window without a scratch. $400,000 unit wasn't even recognizable. Guy was fired when insurance pulled the ECM out of the rig and found he was going over 100 kilometers per hour around a 50 kilometer per hour corner and didn't even touch the brakes. Man fell 75 feet due to standing on the wrong side of the pipe he was cutting. You ever see those cartoons where they cut the branch while standing on the branch? He was cutting from inside, and everyone thinks he just got disoriented. Man crushed in a 40 megaton stamping press. Man fell into a scrap metal grinder. Take your pick. Worked for a nursing home that's right near the local fairgrounds. They brought a bunch of wheelchair-bound residents up on a small embankment overlooking the approach to the fairgrounds to watch the opening day parade. One guy's wheelchair didn't get locked, and he went over backwards, fell 20 feet, broke his neck, and shattered his skull. Had a cornstarch dust explosion at a previous job, and no, it's not previous because I caused it, lol. A truly stupid guy decided he'd sneak a cigarette break in basically the worst place he could. He came very close to death for his stupidity and could have taken others with him, but thankfully, he was the only one seriously injured when the dust went boom. Pretty sure he made himself disabled for life. That night, I was pretty far from the boom area doing vacuum decay testing on completed bags of sugar substitute. I was uninjured, but it definitely scared the shit out of me. Downed firefighter trapped in a fire, never got out, and then falling through a roof. If we talk about what happened to other people and still talking accidents, impalement through a head after a fall, and 2 kids run over by a train, but the list can go on. Teenage girl cut off her fingers after refusing to wear the cut-proof glove because it was ugly. My cousin had a roofing company, and a guy wasn't using his safety tether while on a roof. He fell off and ended up falling into a hole that had been dug so they could work on some electrical wiring. He was electrocuted and died on the way to the hospital. Follow safety protocol, folks. When I worked at a grocery store, a guy lost his thumb in the meat slicer. Worst part is, because of the blade, it went flying and they couldn't find it soon enough to reattach. Deli was closed for 24 hours. The bank where my wife worked was constructing an expansion. During the construction, rigging on a steel beam slipped and a steel beam fell on a worker, killing him. She had to explain to customers all day long why the side entrance to the bank was taped off and police cars and other emergency vehicles were present, without actually saying that someone had died because they didn't want that being put out there. There was a construction accident. Oh my God, is everyone okay? I don't really have that information.
I could understand how you'd protect that type of information. You don't want people to feel uncomfortable or weirded out, so it's terrible, but it's business.
We had a guy killed by being blown up at a gas explosion at a house. We had 2 employees on a construction site killed by a gunman who then killed himself. We had a director who was driving to the airport for a business trip killed by a truck tire going through his car. Those are the worst ones I know about. Worked in a grocery store as a teenager. My coworker and still friend was lowering a huge pallet of 1-liter apple juice Tetra packs, and the whole thing tipped from like 20 feet up. Thousands of liters of apple juice flooded the whole back of the store. It was super hot that day, and it just smelled like intense hot apple juice. We had the worst ant problem forever. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but what a god-awful mess. At Walmart, an assistant manager had a heart attack in the break room. When she was taken away and treated, she disappeared from work for months, and when she finally came back, Walmart management decided to put her outside in the hot California summer heat to be a greeter. When she refused, they didn't care, and she quit. Every single person on my team was saying they probably did it on purpose and wanted her to quit. Really effed up, and it's probably true. I watched a guy who pinned his safety guard back on his skill saw with a nail lay the still spinning blade right into the meat of his thigh. It went right in. I almost passed out when he yanked it out. He was in shock and laughing about how the blade was so hot it cauterized the cut, so not much blood. He then got into his yellow Bronco with a bad clutch and drove himself to the hospital. Very corporate office. Workplace accidents aren't a thing. Girl was going out late after work and changed in the women's bathroom. We don't have a full-length mirror, so she grabbed an office chair to stand on to check her fit. Obviously, she fell. Leg broken in 2 places, including her femur. Bit through her tongue. Since it was after hours, no one was in the office. She had to call an ambulance. Woof. A wheel on the deep fryer collapsed while it was in use, flooded the kitchen with 200 degree Celsius hot oil. Thankfully, most people were out of the splash, so the worst that happened was their shoes got ruined. I got a couple burns on my arms, but that wasn't unusual for me. The manager, though, almost lost a leg. The way it collapsed, it pretty much splashed directly on his leg. Immediate 3rd-degree burns. Happened years ago. He's fine now, but a good chunk of his leg got burned off. Someone didn't follow lockout-tagout protocol. Guy grabbed a wire and was electrocuted so badly it shot him out of his boots. He was dead pretty much instantly. Another time, this guy walked right off the edge and fell 200 feet to his death. Was impaled by some scaffolding at the bottom. Dude had been doing this kind of work for 15 years. Just got way too comfortable being up in the air that high and wasn't paying attention to where he was walking. I traveled for work, so these events didn't happen at the same place. Semi-trailer brakes get checked with the brakes released. Checked from below, that is. Wheel, chocks, piece of wood under the tire, and flat ground are mandatory. One guy failed to meet these basic requirements, had a trailer roll over his head. I wasn't there, but those who were so freaked out that I had to look up the news story. No one would speak of it. The infamous St. Patrick's Day fire at the Port Arthur, Texas Texaco Refinery in March of '77. As I remember, 30 men were burned when a propane line on a running pump split. 7 of the men died. I had trained on that unit just 2 weeks prior and was working on a different unit the day of the explosion. It was horrible. Nothing tragic, mostly funny. Not at my actual workplace, but I traveled around the big 3 automakers plants in southeast Michigan as a consultant for one of their divisions. This dude was driving an electric lift truck, and for some reason there was an issue. This dumbass gets the bright idea of pulling the cable that connects the battery to the truck. Instantly loses the ability to stop or steer, and is too dumb to press the e-brake. Goes right through a wall into a bathroom, taking out all the plumbing and flooding half the building. I work at a warehouse that works with big batteries like car batteries, golf cart batteries, boat batteries, stuff like that. One of the things we do is buy batteries that are still good and then recharge them and resell them at a discounted price. This guy was hooking the batteries up to the battery charger, and he was wearing a metal ring, which is a big no-no. So yeah, he melted his finger down to the bone. He was in complete shock. I have several jobs. One of them is a tour guide in a cave. I have a story of my own about how I nearly died. that I may share if anyone is interested, but this story is not my own. One of our biggest rules is to always do head counts and safety stops, especially on the walkout, because people tend to linger and fall behind. It's dangerous to leave people behind, but also, someone could have a medical emergency, and no one may notice if you don't stop and check. 2 years ago, that happened. The tour guide wasn't tending to their group on the walk back and didn't make stops to gather people and make sure everyone was okay. It's a moderately easy trail, but someone had a medical emergency, and her family didn't notice. She had a heart attack, fell, and was left behind. She ended up dying in the cave. It's something we stress so much because it's a real issue. Always tend to your guests.
Yeah, accountability goes without saying. You gotta look out for the people that you're in charge of, so could have been avoided. I mean, she might still have passed away, but still.
Not nearly as bad as many others here, but I saw a coworker get his glove caught in a sheet metal roller. It is a machine that you feed sheet metal into and it rolls it into a cylinder. There's a big sign above it that says no gloves, but he used gloves anyway. Got all four of his fingers smashed flat and rolled up into the steel roller, followed by his hand, before someone else slapped the emergency stop. They had to disassemble the machine to get his hand out, and they basically tied off his arm so he wouldn't bleed out. It was just a river of blood coming out of the glove before that, and then he was rushed off to the hospital where he got his hand amputated. Working on a film set, people were rushing on a Friday to get things done. Some peeps on the crew were holding up a wall under construction, and another person was drilling through said wall during assembly. They didn't call out the positions, well, due to speed, and someone's hand ended up getting drilled straight through. The poor guy had to yell to back the drill out of his hand so he could remove his arm from the set. He made it a few steps away and fainted. Pretty awful experience for everyone involved. I know the guy doing the drilling had some pretty bad PTSD after, too. This happened January 30th, outside. I install insulation in newly built homes. Understand the doors or windows are not installed yet. Working with one of the guy who's my trainer. Insulation requires bats of insulation, vapor barrier to vapor the insulation, and caulking. My buddy took the roll of vapor barrier and I turned around to walk away. And I just hear a boom, bang. I came back around and was like, dude, haha, what did you... The kid was laying on his back, blood out of the ears, had a hard time speaking, and what happened was he cut a piece of vapor barrier and mixed with the snow on the floor, he stepped on the barrier and slipped and landed straight on the back of his head. Here I am calling 911 because it's a brand new home. The ambulance couldn't find the street. Also, because it was so cold, nobody was working the whole street, different contractors, so it's just me and him. There's a big window right next to him, and it's freezing. So I give him my jacket, and he told me walking around him really hurt his back by movement. So I took the extra insulation and covered him up to keep him warm. Ambulance found the place, but holy F, it was nice knowing he wasn't the only one working that day. Worked in a bar. After I had been there for about a month or two, one weekend it was packed. Some guy got his throat slit right at the bar. The dude was annoying, whistling really loudly, and was after what I heard the annoying and obnoxious type. Someone just walked up behind him with a broken glass or a knife and just slit his throat. Nobody saw what happened until the guy was standing there with both hands on his throat with blood gushing through his hands and a mortified face. One of my friends working security ran over to him, and the victim removed his hands. Blood sprayed all over my friend's face. Then used the victim as a battering ram through the club to get him out of there ASAP. He survived, and the guy who did it was never caught as far as I know. Heard it was most likely some gang stuff later. Worked at Staples. Every 2 weeks we'd get a paper delivery. I'm talking dozens of cases, each filled with 10 reams of paper. And for whatever reason, it always came on just one pallet. So that pallet was goddamn heavy, easily over 1,000 pounds. Bare minimum of 2 people to push it across the store. One day, a guy and I and my ops manager were moving it from the truck, him pushing the jack, my manager pulling. I was there just bullshitting with them. The guy pushing the jack must have just not been paying attention, because he pulled the release lever while his foot was under the pallet. Oof. Heavy as it was, the pallet didn't drop. It effing crashed to the concrete floor. It caught half of the guy's foot, and I shit you not, it was like a foot stomped down on a water balloon filled with red dye. There was an honest-to-God corona of blood on the floor when they finally managed to lift the pallet jack back up. The most shocking part of all this was he didn't lose the foot, only lost a couple of toes, I think. I'm not sure. We didn't see him around after that, and no goddamn wonder. I was almost potentially one of these stories. Used to be a stagehand for one of the largest production companies in the US, and we were tearing apart a build. They had lowered one of the big trusses filled with equipment so we could strip it down. A little old lady asked me to help her, and without hesitating, I ducked under the suspended truss to get to her side, stood up to help her, and watched as a good 4-foot-long, couple hundred-pound chain slammed down into the ground right where I'd been standing. If it didn't kill me, it would have crippled me for life.
It's crazy how sometimes we're either in a rush or happy to help someone, and for some reason we have that momentary loss of the things that are right and protocol, and you narrowly avoid disaster.
I work in a residential treatment facility for teenagers. We had this horse farm behind our property that was separated from our facility by a small fence. Our kids would sometimes lose balls behind the fence while playing. This happened one day, so one of my coworkers hopped the fence to get to the ball. My coworker had done this multiple times with no issues. I guess a horse was having a bad day that day because they ended up trampling the coworker. I work in an office, so mostly see lame shit as a first aider. Some of the more crazy ones. Dude zipped his schlong in his jeans and went full something about Mary with that sucker, and his foreskin was full gnarled in the zipper truck. Ugh. And Levi's aren't known for having crap zippers. Had to chop up the jeans and pry apart the zipper with a couple of pairs of pliers before sending him off to the ED for repairs. Old lady hit by a car exiting the work car park. It was low speed, but old people's bones and skin may as well be made out of tissue paper, so she had her tibia and fibula smashed out of the side of her leg, as well as a mangled hip and bad head lass. During a fire drill, some numpty a few floors below tried to cart their metal-cased first aid down the stairs, and they tripped and dropped the case, and it slashed another evacuee pretty badly on the arm, so our fake emergency became a very serious real one when we saw the arterial spray on the wall of the stairwell. Not witnessed, but a colleague had a serious cardiac event on a football oval during an inter-company rugby match and died on scene. And a vivid story during our first aid refresher course when I was in a group that had all the park's environment workers in it. Industrial accidents, where people fell in vats of acid, got crushed, fell into deep holes, and my personal favorite, the policy at BHP when someone falls into a smelter is to push them under with a pole to end it quickly, which sounds fake, but the crucible is 5,000 degrees Celsius, and what doesn't boil on contact with the surface of the molten steel will be clean melted off when the person begins to submerge, leading to a particular injury called hemiocorporiorectomy, which would be considered an injury not compatible with life, and so no resuscitation effort would be made.